Welcome to the Unmuted Podcast. My name is Jeff. I'm the host of the podcast, and I'm also the founder of ScaleHR and SocialHRCamp. And so this is a fantastic podcast where we talk about all things HR, talent, HR tech, world of work. And so all of our episodes can be accessed on our website, GoScaleHR.com, and on YouTube as well. And so all of our guests are experts in HR tech. They could be HR leaders, talent leaders, and practitioners, and also many others. And early days, they were mostly Canadian and American, but now we are venturing globally. And so a lot of our guests are from all four corners of the globe. So we have a fantastic episode here today, as I always say. But this is a really cool topic. And so we've spent a lot of time during the past almost 6 years now talking about hybrid work as a flexibility problem. But what if that's actually not the real issue? So I'm going to give you just a couple of points here. So the very first point is flexibility did not solve the core problem. And so companies gave people flexibility, but still struggle with things like coordination, visibility, consistency, and so forth. And so flexibility gave people option, but it didn't improve the final outcome of decision making. And when leaders don't have the right data or visibility, they just don't feel uncertain. They make the wrong calls on space, culture, and performance. So that's the first point. The second point is hybrid work is an intelligent problem. So leaders are making decisions about space, people, and culture, but they don't really always have real data, real insight, real coordination. And so hybrid work is not just about where people work. It's also about how decisions get made in a distributed environment. And so the topic here today is that hybrid work is not about flexibility, it's about intelligence. And so we're going to unpack that today with our guest. And I just want to welcome Arnaud Mardegan to the Unmuted Podcast. So we are going to unpack what workplace intelligence actually means, and then what it looks like when organizations get this right. So welcome to the Unmuted Podcast.
Thank you, Jeff.
And before we dive into our topic, I just want to ask you, maybe just talk a bit about what you do.
Yeah, of course. So I'm the founder of Othership. So I founded Othership with Benjamin Crew in 2018. I was just freshly out of a consulting company, basically, and started to experience of the hybrid working world when I was working in consulting. And working with different organizations. And that's kind of when I came across these challenges. So originally we started to work on a platform that would allow a company to access workspaces on a more flexible basis. So back in the days when we started the company, I think the most flexible thing you could do with an office was maybe a 6-month lease with a WeWork or equivalent, basically, at the time. But there was nothing like hiring an office for a month, let alone for a day, for example. So that's when we started this. And it was before COVID, with the vision that this would become more of a trend down the line. Now, obviously, COVID accelerated this a little bit. And to be completely honest, we did not predict this, but COVID did accelerate the trend. And it meant that bigger organization started working a bit more hybrid and using a bit more flexible workspaces, etc. So that's when the platform sort of kind of grew from there, basically.
So which parts of the world did you start, and then where have you gone with Othership?
Geographically, you mean?
Yeah.
So we started in London. So the service was actually very sort of like nail it and scale it kind of approach. So even in London, we picked like very specific areas to start the service. So we picked, say we started with Shoreditch, then we grew from Shoreditch to more central, and then we expanded in London like for the first couple of years maybe. And then after COVID, COVID allowed us to go at scale a bit quicker. So we scaled in the entirety of the UK after the COVID, because more organizations were aware of these new services and all that sort of stuff. And it just made reach out easier, and it just allowed us to grow in the UK fairly quickly. And then we grew internationally towards Europe and the US, I think about like around 2023, 2024, something like this.
Okay. Okay, cool. Now let's dive into our topic here. And so the question is, or the key topic here, the theme of this episode is hybrid work is not about flexibility. It's about intelligence, right? So my first question for you is, why do you think companies are still stuck framing hybrid work as a flexibility problem when the real issues are clearly deeper?
I guess it's mainly because it comes from a sentiment or something from the employees, basically, who want more flexibility because they feel like that they can do their job with more flexibility just as well, if not better. So I guess because it comes from there, then most leaders will see this as a sort of like product of like a flexibility and like this like a feeling or a demand from the workers, if that makes sense. But and it's basically it's unfortunately it's framed the challenges with a big focus on flexibility, which to be honest is a variable of the equation, but one of the many. And it's a bit unfortunate that we're focusing on that one variable, which is the flexibility, when there's so many others to look at. If that makes sense.
I think it does, because obviously the vantage point of the employee is going to be quite different than a leader, to what they're sort of focused on. But I think in the last 6 years, obviously we've had a good number of years of actual touch experiences, right, globally, like on a global scale. And so I think we can really sort of see through where some of the things are working and breaking. And so when you look at hybrid work, so playing out, okay, in companies today, what are the biggest breakdowns that you're seeing in hybrid work? And then where are these breakdowns leading to the wrong business outcomes?
When you say breakdown, you mean like in terms of the different aspects of hybrid working, in terms of what's going on within the organization?
So like obviously, like hybrid work is supposed to be a fluid arrangement, or some organizations have it pretty fluid, some don't, right? And so there's always breakdowns. Like for example, like teams, may not be sort of linking up together when they have to. Maybe there's alignment between manager and the employee, stuff like that.
Got it. I would say there are many. Like some of them are logistical, some others are cultural. But just to pick a few examples, you'll have some organizations where they have offered flexibility to their teams, but with very loose control over it and very loose policies or like very loose processes, which means sometimes that it will lead to completely overcrowded days in the office. Because in the meantime, whilst COVID happened, they downsized their offices to save on costs. But they didn't necessarily completely downsize the team as much as the office. And now what they're trying to do is, because they have given the staff a bit of flexibility and hybrid working policies, they haven't regrown the office. So they find themselves with like very much overcrowded days compared to some days that are completely dead. Yeah. So if you pick, I don't know, like a random Wednesday in an office is generally completely empty compared to potentially a Tuesday or a Thursday where everyone's coming in. So basically that's one of the problems that you can have, very logistical. So that's from like sort of the, I would say, logistics manager, office manager. That's a bit of a, of a problem to crack. But also from the team's perspective, the problem is, I want to go in the office, but I don't know when. I have no idea. Like, I want to go to the office, but I want to make sure it means something. I want to see people and collaborate with them. And if I go to the office and there's no one, I will feel like I just traveled for no reason whatsoever. So there's also from the team's perspective that sometimes this problem where they want to go to the office, they just don't know when. So what's happening is they Slack people or they WhatsApp people and they go like, are you in the office tomorrow? Are you in the office tomorrow? And like if fortunately a couple of people reply to you, you go like, cool, enough people are going to justify me going in. Yay. So you've got like this sort of things happening. And then you've got some other organizations who've tried to sort of like give more solid processes, but they've missed what the employees were if that makes sense. So they've said, for example, okay, cool, come back 3 days per week in the office at least, and come on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then there's a problem where the employees are like, but we don't want to come on Fridays. Like that's not even remotely the best day for us to come into the office. And then there's a bit of frustration from the employees who go like, that's maybe a bit over the top in terms of like processes. And then you'll have the same problem with companies who say, like, come 3 days a week in the office, but whenever you want. And then they go like, well, cool, but we don't know when. So there's tons of problems like this. And then sometimes it ends up with people not going enough to the office, which means then you've got this loss of like, culture, or like, when you've had a team that's been working together for 10 years or whatever, it's fine. Like, people can work remotely and the culture will remain, it's fine.
Sure.
But when you're a company who's hiring on a regular basis, if you hire people but you never have them in the office, how can you give them this sense of the culture of your company? It's really difficult. So I guess that's also an issue that we're trying to solve. Is we're trying to say we can solve all these things without having these restrictive policies that potentially like don't engage with like they don't click with employees.
Yeah, so I think everything that you just said, I'm going yes, 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 tick, tick, tick. And so what I'm hearing is, as I said already twice now, this is not a flexibility problem. The flexibility problem has been solved. I mean, we can be as flexible as we want. I mean, that's not the problem here, but they are tackling the wrong problem, right? And so leaders are making choices about space, culture, and team, but they don't really know what's going on, right? They have no idea. So it's really like a data problem, and they're really operating blind. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, 100%. It's really hard from being a business leader myself. Like, it's really hard to understand like what's going on with the teams, etc. And also when you reach a certain point, like the teams are not necessarily as open to yourself as they would have been with someone else. So it's really difficult to understand what's going on without objective data. So if you just ask people, the answer you're going to get is going to vary depending on who asks the question. And so if the CEO of a company asks, oh, cool, what do you want as a sort of like overall hybrid working policy or hybrid working environment, the response the CEO is going to get is going to be very different to, say, your colleague is asking you, your friend and colleague is asking you, what would you want? And your answer is probably going to be very different because you believe the expectations are different. So for a CEO who probably wants a very genuine answer, it makes it really difficult to make a decision. So not having access to sort of like very tangible and objective data, it makes life really hard to then make a decision on what's the best policy, what's the best way to manage the office, etc., etc.
And also, if leaders can actually back up why they're making these choices, they're actually coming forward and saying, well, this is the reason why, with real data, then you start to lose credibility. The employees start to lose trust in it because it's like, well, they just made it up and that's it, right? So just shifting gears here. So we've mentioned, a couple times this concept of workplace intelligence. Yeah. And so what does that actually mean though? In practice. And so how does it shift leaders from making assumptions to making evidence-based decisions?
Well, so it means that you've got access to data you didn't have access to before. So basically what you can do is you can start making decisions and measure the impact. So you can say, for example, cool, so we're going to set up this hybrid working policy. And then we're going to take a look at how it works. Like, does it mean people are starting to collaborate more? Does it mean people are starting to book the office on a certain day to work together or not, et cetera, et cetera? And then you can start also making small incremental changes to your policies and processes to see what has a positive impact on what's going on in your workplace. And that's really the big difference, if that makes sense. Because before, you would just make changes, but with no real way of like sort of gauging if it has a positive impact or not. You would just make guesses. And some people would guess right, but some people would guess wrong as well, if that makes sense. So it's really this that is making a difference, is basically cool. Now I've got an idea of what I've won for my company, and for each company will be different. Like like for a certain company, 2 days a week in the office will be right. For a company, 4 days a week will be right, etc. There's no like overall right policy for everyone. But once you've got an idea of what would be right for your company, you can start implementing it. And then you can start measuring how that works with your workforce. And you can start measuring if incremental changes make a positive impact or not. And you can start then sort of like almost in an agile way, if that makes sense, go towards the best policy for your company.
Yeah, I think you mentioned something too that resonated with me, and that is that what might work for one organization may not work for another. And I think that is really, really powerful because that happens a lot. I got, asked a lot, oh, so what's the best practice? I'm like, well, I don't know. I mean, company A over here, company B over here. This is a small, tech company of about 80 people. This one here is, 8,000 employees in a regulated sector. Apples and oranges, right? So I think there's the lessons learned. But I really think, and I encourage everybody out there to really make sure that you sort of learn from that, but you do what's right for you. So my next question, I like to ask this question. So we've talked about the challenges, the problem, the solution, but what does good actually look like? Okay, so if any leader watching this, what does intelligent hybrid work look like, right? When it's done well, and then what actually improves as a outcome?
Hybrid work done well is everybody's happy. So I would say from business leadership to all of the workers in the company, everyone feel that what's been set up works. Leaders feel confident that they've got a policy that that works for their business, that doesn't impact productivity, or if it impacts it positively. That also, if a policy was set up, it impacts culture positively, it impacts mental health positively, etc. And from the workers' perspective, it means that they have the impression that they've been heard, that they've got something that works for them, for their work-life balance, etc. So I feel like hybrid working done well is this, and is also having visibility from both ends of the spectrum. So the business leaders have visibility on what is going on, but also the workers feel like they know what's going on. Like they don't go blind into the office, or they don't stay blind at home. Everyone knows what's going on in the workplace. And I feel like that's the most powerful thing, is just everybody knows what's going on. There's no area of gray or dark, or do you know what I mean? Like everyone has got a clear understanding of what is happening in the workplace. And I think that's the ideal situation.
So how do you measure all that? I mean, obviously I'm going to put a little plug in here for Othership, right? And so I'm going to assume that the software, the platform, can actually help leaders understand all of this. There are different ways to understand if people are happy or not. I mean, there's a different way to do that. So maybe just talk a bit about that. So what that looks like in terms of the ongoing measurement.
Of course. So I think, so if you look at the Othership workplace platform, you can go like, oh, cool, it's just a desk booking platform. Apart from telling me when people have booked a desk, it's not going to tell me much. But actually, Othership has gone a little further than this. So you've got tons of tools out there that allow you to book a desk, book a meeting room, etc., etc. But what we've done is, not only have we added a layer of data analysis to understand the patterns, the patterns in terms of like the daily bookings, the weekly bookings, monthly, etc., but also in terms of layout, like what's going on geographically in the office. We've got like sort of heat maps understanding of what's going on. So if you want to try and potentially refurbish your space, it will give you clues as to how to optimize the space. But I'll go even further. What we've done is we've added a layer of social understanding. So what the Othership platform does is it allows people to also build events in the platform. It allows people to create, and it can be created by business leaders. It can be created by teams. So you can create teams as well, and you can create teams between teams. So say, for example, you're part of a huge organization and you're part of, say, the IT department. You can also create a team that is the cyclists in our company, and it will also help you create a relationship between people in different teams based on hobbies, etc. And you can create events that are also happening outside of work, but also inside of work. If they've been approved by HR, by your manager, etc., you can also make them happen in the workplace. And what that does is that it gives business leaders an understanding of what's also culturally happening in the company. All that stuff would normally happen in WhatsApp or like private Slack groups, or like things where you would never see what's going on. But this type of thing will tell people like, cool, so there are actually a lot of different social hubs in my company. How do I capitalize on that? How do I make sure that my workplace is, like capitalizing on all these social hubs? So we've gone a step further to integrate the social aspect of what's going on in a hybrid company, and that gives also a lot of data understanding from both the leader's perspective and the employee's perspective in terms of what is actually going on in the company. And say, for example, I want to go to the office, but I don't want it to mean nothing from the work's perspective, but also from the social perspective. So what you're going to do is you're going to use the tool to basically, meet up with your colleagues so you can collaborate with them, but also you're going to be able to manage and create an event for your pals who you're cycling with, So you can go in the evening and cycle with them. And you've gone to the
Right.
office, you've collaborated with your team, and you've had a great time, and you've built on culture as well. So it's sort of like it's a tool that has got this additional layer that other platforms have completely disregarded, which is the social and human aspect of it, if that makes sense.
Right. It totally does. The platform also layers in the online stuff too, because obviously people work from home. They're using Slack or they're using Teams or they're using Google or whatever. And so this is not just about the physical space of your office. It's also about what happens in the virtual space too, which is really
100%.
very powerful because it brings it all, So I think, obviously this has been a hot topic for 6 years. Hybrid work, virtual work, and I've written about it, I've talked about it, and I've done lots of work in this area. I think if I were to say, if there's one takeaway from this conversation, I think it's that hybrid work is not broken, right? It's just being managed to the right level of intelligence. And we've said that word many times, right? And it's leading to the wrong choices and, outcomes. And so flexibility obviously gave people freedom. Honestly, hybrid work, virtual work has been a godsend. You can now work with people anywhere, and that's been great. But intelligence is what turns that freedom into something that actually works. And I think that's the part where we need to do better with. I know, if there's anything, if there's one thing that anyone can learn from this episode, based on your personal view, so what is that one thing?
Don't ever give up on trying to find something that works. I think sometimes you can be very tempted to either go back to the old days where nothing was flexible, nothing was hybrid, etc. Because you were like, I can't manage this, too much for me. Let's just go back to what it was. At least we know how it was, etc. It's easy and it feels secure to go back to this. Or on the other hand, sometimes you have people, oh, do you know what? Like, screw this, I'm just going to go fully flexible, not even going to look, and just be like this, and then it ends up really badly. So I feel just don't give up on trying to find the right answer, because it does exist, and also don't try and copy what's being good in another company, because it doesn't mean it's going to be good in yours. So I think, unfortunately, I wish there was like a magic answer for everyone, but there isn't. It's just a little bit of sort of like hard work and using the right tools to understand what's actually going on in the workplace. It's a process. It takes a little bit of time, but it's doable for any organization.
On that note, I want to thank you for being here. There is no silver bullet, but Othership is actually a pretty cool platform, and I've checked it out many times. So we're going to drop all of the links and so forth in the videos. So Othership.com. So please go there. And so thank you for being here, and all of our viewers. This is the Unmuted Podcast. I'm Jeff. Please share your comments. I want to hear from you. And obviously, most of our episodes are dropped on Thursday mornings, and they're on YouTube and our website, ScaleHR.com. So thank you very much.